Good morning. I'm delighted to be here and very honored by this invitation. And I have to say that I was a sorority girl at Northwestern, so Evanston is my backyard. So I want to begin by doing something that I promise you is not so Californian, but you have to uncross your legs, put anything on your lap on the floor. I promise no one will take it. And comfortably sit in your seat. I want you to close your eyes for a moment. Take a deep breath in. And exhale. Take another deep breath in. And exhale. One final breath in. And exhale. Keeping your eyes closed, I want you to go back to a particular moment in time in 2001. 9/11, and you had just heard what had happened. Where were you? What was your first thought? Who was sitting next to you? What emotion welled up in your heart? What questions were raised? When you're ready, open your eyes. That moment was a communal moment of questioning, of sadness, of despair, of loss of hope. And even the most powerful people, leaders, so grounded in their faith, couldn't help but ask the question, where was God? I remember the Shabbat right after that, and our synagogue was incredibly packed. And one after the other, people kept saying to me, where is God? And I, being the spiritual leader, was supposed to provide some answer. Over the years, in my own life as a rabbi, people have asked that question again and again. Both in tragedies on the global level, just this week, but on the personal level as well. And when people came to me, they had brought up reasons where God could possibly be and why this evil was happening. Now, as we face a challenging economy, the situation in Mumbai last week, people come up with all kinds of reasons. Here's what they first told me. Rabbi, God is punishing us. God is punishing us, just like it says in Deuteronomy. We worship false gods, and we will be punished. And this is the punishment that we deserve. And I look at them, and I think to myself, that cannot be my God. The second is that God has abandoned us. To our ancestors, God spoke fluidly, rapidly. There were burning bushes, audible words. But to us, there's silence. God is in such despair that God has retreated. And I can't believe in that God. And the third reason that people often came to me was that God was testing us. Just like God asked Abraham to sacrifice his only son, Isaac, upon an altar, this son that he had prayed for and dreamed about and had in very old age, to test his faith, this is our test. And let me tell you, that is a God I want to fire for sure. Because really, I don't need any more tests. I'll tell you what happened in my own life. I was a pulpit rabbi for 10 years in Los Angeles. And When I started, I was a single young woman having just come out of the seminary in New York. And my father got very sick with pancreatic cancer, which they call the silent killer. 6 months from diagnosis to death at 58 years old. And I had to get in front of my congregants, about 1,500, which is small for, I know, many of you, but for Jews, that's a big crowd. And say, I believe. And I watched my father be ravaged by this illness. And I was without words, which is very hard for a rabbi. And I remember I was sitting with my son. We have 3 children, my husband. I always have to say we, else he gets very mad. But remember, I went through the labor and that. Just note to self. So sure enough, we were sitting praying with our first son, Emmett, which means in Hebrew, truth. And he is not named after Emmett Smith, who broke the passing record that week. He is named after the note that God dropped from the sky when God had retreated in silence. And out of the sky dropped one piece of paper to the people, and on it was the word emet, truth. And of course, we were praying with our son, as we do every night. And conversation brought up with, what do you want to be when you grow up? Because every parent asks that. And my husband, who has all doctors in his family, all doctors, was like, I've got it in the pan. It's all mine. Don't even think. Now I, who have 14 rabbis in my family, was like, don't even look at me. So Emmett says, I know what I want to be when I grow up. Pause. I want to be a pirate. Maybe not the best week to say that, but. And we laughed. We laughed just the way you are laughing in this moment, because we were reveling in this extraordinary creation that we had developed together with God. At that moment, Emmett wasn't our adversary, he was our child, believing and dreaming that he could become anything. And we were sitting there dreaming with him. And it was then that it became incredibly clear to me that this was the way that God was looking at us. That this was a God who was a parent, a friend, a partner that was reveling in each one of our creations, each one of his creations, each one of her creations. That this wasn't a God that was testing us. This wasn't a God that didn't care about us. This wasn't a God that for sure wasn't punishing us. It was the opposite. This is the God that was caring deeply for us, that was loving us in a way that we couldn't even love ourselves. There's a great story from the Talmud that when the Talmud is the oral tradition of the Jewish heritage, that when the first temple was destroyed, the people were weeping, and their tears were so audible. And where was God? God was weeping with them. That is the kind of God I need as a leader in the community. I know this because it's in Genesis, the first book of what many call the Old Testament, what Jews call the Bible. If you remember the story, kind of well known, 6 days God created the world, and on the 7th day God rested. And what happened in the very final moments of creation? God did the strangest of things. God created us, dysfunctional, broken, mortal people. Now you're thinking, what was God thinking? Really? I mean, sun, moon, sky, earth, everything extraordinary that you can marvel at. And in the final moments, us? Really? Couldn't have God come up with something better? And what the commentators say is something beautiful. That God was lonely. That it wasn't just us that needed God, but God needed us. That God needed us to finish creation, to be a partner in crime, not in the bad way. I say that God gives us grapes and we make wine. In my book, I say God gives us water and we make Diet Coke. That's the creation that God needs us to finish. And the way that God does that is very simple. God endows each one of us with a divine spark. Now, the Kabbalist, which you probably have heard of the word Kabbalah from this pop singer named Madonna, or now Esther. They believe, as part of the Jewish tradition, that each one of us is divine. That within each one of us there is a light that shines and can light up the world. And it doesn't necessarily have to be an extraordinary light. You don't have to be famous or rich or powerful. That your particular light can be incredibly regular. That you can be an incredible listener. That you know exactly the time when someone is dying to hold their hand. That you can look at someone and calm them just with your eyes. That's what God understands what it means to be divine in this world. The Muslims have something close to this concept called ilm, which is divine knowledge, which is this part of yourself that is brought to the world. And every single person in this room has it. The person sitting next to you, on your left and on your right, has the ability to light the world in the most regular of ways. I know it. I've seen it in the world. Because what happened after 9/11 was magical. To see people bring their divine light to the world in the weeks and the months that followed was absolutely extraordinary. Firemen, policemen, regular people doing what they do to bring justice, to repair a broken world, is the way that we are supposed to partner with God. And so God is not far away, God is very close. God is in this room, lighting it up. People always ask me, can you hear God? Does God speak to you directly? Yes. You guys had the good fortune of being here a few weeks ago. I was in Los Angeles watching it on TV, but you felt it in Grant Park. You felt a sense of hope, of possibility. Every time a political leader stands, regardless of their affiliation, to make the world better, you feel it. I want to tell you a quick story, and then I'll conclude. I was a latchkey kid. We were just talking about it at the table. Kids that both their parents worked. And so my mother was a fashionista. She was a personal shopper for Nordstrom's, you may have heard. And my father owned a lighting business, like fixtures, not these kind of fixtures, light bulbs. These are a little grander than his store could accommodate. And I was dropped off at a woman's house named Shirley Kolodny every day after school. And along with myself, there were two other girls. One girl whose mother was an eye surgeon, and another girl whose mother was a lawyer. And every day after school, we would sit and we would tell Shirley all our woes of being teenagers, right? And it can go on and on and on. 3 girls, can you imagine? And we would talk, and she would listen. And often I would hear her say, I'm just a housewife. I'm just a housewife. I'm nothing. And I never thought a moment about it. Because when you're 14, you only think mostly about yourself. You'll know when you have teenagers. Fast forward 20 years later, and I'm sitting at a wedding with these 3 women. And we have more letters behind our names and all that. And the girl whose mother was an eye surgeon, she has become an eye surgeon. And the girl whose mother was a lawyer, she has become a corporate lawyer. And the girl whose mother was a fashionista has now become a rabbi. And all we're talking about is Shirley. And what a difference she made in our lives. That she listened to us. And what I didn't realize, there was a lot of turmoil going on. My parents subsequently divorced after high school. One of the other girls, her father died. But she listened, and in her total extraordinary way, in her regular way, she was extraordinary. That's what it means to light the world. I called her up just as a conclusion to the story to tell her that we'd been speaking about her at a wedding, and there was silence on the other side of the phone. And I thought maybe I had crossed a boundary. I said, "Hi, do you remember me? I'm Sherry's Welling, now Hirsch." And my mother had kept up with her. She now lived in Deerfield, Massachusetts. And there was utter silence. And her husband grabbed the phone and he said, "Sherry, my wife, her whole life, felt very small. She felt she was just a housewife. And today you let her know she was so much more." And as leaders in our community, that's what our job is to do. That's what we're here to do, is to light up the world and to help other people realize how much they matter, how much they are integral to being a partner in God's creation, regardless of your title or your pocketbook. The Torah, our book, says that we are made b'tselem Elohim, in God's image. And as a young child, I thought to be in God's image means that I look just like God. Not the case. It means to carry that spark, to hold that spark, and to know that it is my task in life to light and repair the world. So this is my prayer for all of you this morning. May we remember that we share a dedication to loving and serving one God with all our hearts and with all our souls. May we remember that we share a desire to repair the world, to pursue justice, to make it just a little bit better while we're here, and to strive for peace, regardless of our adversaries. May we always remember mostly that each one of us has the ability, the obligation, the desire to light the world. Thank you very much.